Last time we discussed the Atari VCS, also known as the Atari 2600. When it was released, design for its replacement began immediately. Around this time, the personal computer market was forming. The Apple II was released in June 1977, just months before the VCS. Atari shifted its original designs for the VCS's successor from a game console into the Atari computer line, the Model 400 and 800, released in November 1979. The names were originally based on the memory capacity of the two models, 4K and 8K of RAM, respectively. Due to a drop in the price of RAM chips from design to release time, however, both systems were released with an 8K capacity. Both machines were complex, based both on manufacturing and regulatory concerns. The XL series of computers, announced in December 1982, was an answer to these problems. Relaxed regulations relating to signal interference, combined with improved manufacturing techniques, allowed Atari to redesign the computers to be both smaller and cheaper to build. This is an Atari 800XL computer, originally released in October of 1983. The 64K of RAM included by default exceeds the original capacity of the 800 model by 8 times, which explains the bold call-out on the box and the "more memory means more power" tagline. The side of the box further calls out the features of the 800XL. There were very few differences between the original 400-800 computers and the later XL line. One of those differences is the built-in Atari Basic programming language. Earlier models required a separate cartridge. Most of these features, including the display capabilities and the connectivity, were shared with the earlier 800 model, however. Again, the primary difference was size and cost. Based on the serial number stamped on the box here, we can see that this machine was built in the 35th week of 1984, not long after the machine was released in late 1983, and almost exactly 30 years ago. Let's open it up. I don't know exactly what this looked like 30 years ago when it was truly first opened, but today the box contains the computer itself and the power supply. As was typical for the time, the computer is an all-in-one unit with the keyboard built into the main computer. One of the manufacturing efficiencies mentioned earlier means that the insides are simple, relying only on a single circuit board. The result is a very compact unit. On the side are two controller ports, using the same controllers as the original VCS. The Atari computers were somewhat more powerful than the alternatives released in the late 1970s, so they ended up with a healthy lineup of video game titles. Only a small number of ports are left on the back side of the computer. The power switch is at one end, next to the power connector. Besides that is the standard RF connector and channel selector switch for connection to a standard television. Next is the monitor connector, which exposes separate video and audio signals. Certain models, not including this 800XL, expose separate Luma and Chroma signals, what is today referred to as S-video, as well as standard composite video plus a mono audio signal. Behind a plastic door is the parallel bus connector. Interestingly, the original 800 had this connector, but it was trapped inside the heavy metal RF shielding, so it was not accessible to the end user. Finally, a single SIO or serial I/O connector is left on the far side. Many Atari peripherals connected to the SIO bus, typically in a daisy chain fashion. This means only one connector is required here on the computer, but many devices can be attached. I plan to go into a number of these peripherals in more detail in future videos. For now, let's power up the base system and take a look. Remember that the XL line has the basic programming language built into the system. So if I power the system on, in only a moment, I'm at a prompt where I can begin entering basic programs. This is specifically Atari Basic. There are many separate versions of the basic language contemporary to this machine, and especially to this era. Here I'll type in a simple program from the Atari Basic Reference Manual, designed to demonstrate some of the graphics capability of the system. Sadly, just like the VCS, the video signal that this Atari computer generates is not quite standard. And again, the video capture device that I'm using is unable to decode the color component of the signal. The black and white picture is good enough to see what's going on, however. If you were paying attention, you may have noticed a red switch on the back that I skipped when describing the ports. Next time we'll talk briefly about that switch.